Gunn Show.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. I'm sorry, guys, for singing, but guess what? We are back to the Gunn Show again. And for those of you who are with us for the first time, the Gunn Show is about humanizing this industry. And this industry happened to be engineering and manufacturing. What an awesome, awesome industry we are in, making everything around us. Well, I don't think we made the air, but we probably could. And people, well, we're working on cloning. Well, engineers, we are creative people. However, the stereotype is we are not always outgoing and a lot of times incredibly humble. So how do we get these amazing people to share their stories? Well, that's what the Gunn Show is for. And don't get it misconstrued. I don't have any guns, although I know a lot of people on my podcast love them, and I don't really have any muscles. So it's certainly not about those types of guns either. It is quite literally about my last name with two N's. And as much as I'd love to be related to the guys who directed Guardians of the Galaxy, that is not my cousin. Also not Tommy Gunn from Rocky. He would also beat me up. I've had that question before as well. However, today we get to welcome my buddy Misa. Misa has a really, in my opinion, forward-thinking idea that, in bad, poor summary, I would say, we're renting robots and allowing, I'm going to let him talk about it. Don't you worry about that. We'll get to that in a little while, but I just wanted to kind of offer you a teaser. Misa works with, and how would you like me to title this, Misa? Because you know this is all just straight off the hip. We don't do any of this ahead of time. What is your title at Formic, which we will go into a bit later?
I'm one of the co-founders and VP of Robotics and VP of Sales.
All right, so guys, let's welcome Misa, one of the co-founders of Formic Technologies. If you have not heard of Formic, if you are a middle to small shop, and forget it, even if you're a large shop, you're going to want to pay attention. But for sure, medium to small shop, this could change how you're doing your manufacturing. I honestly mean that. I really, really do, and I'm stoked to be a part of the Gunn Show today, even though I'm a part of the Gunn Show every day. So Misa, thank you so much for being a part of it with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Tony. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. So Misa, I know you quite well, and I'm going to continue to get to know you better as time goes on. And I just saw you not too long ago where we got to do some amazing filming, which will be released soon as well. But this show is about humanizing the industry. So let's start, before we get into this credible idea that you and your team have come up with, let's talk about who you are. And you can start as young as when you were in Pampers running around your house, or you can start teenage, wherever you feel most comfortable to create the type of character that you are today and the creativity and some of the timeline of your work history as well. I'd love to hear more about this, as would our audience.
Absolutely. So maybe I'll go back a little bit. I was born and raised in Iran. I grew up there since I was, I was born until I was 17, 18. That's when I moved to US. Growing up, always I was really good at math and physics, and naturally I gravitated toward breaking things and fixing them, all my life. Most of my family is fairly technical. Although we came from a farming background, as we came out of the farms, my brothers both took technical jobs, and I kind of, with them, I learned. I mean, they ended up having their own business, so I kind of learned the process of, what do they do, how I can help them in their business. And when I first moved here to the United States, I didn't really know what I want to do. I was, 17, 18-year-old kid, barely spoke any English. So, I kind of figured, hey, math and physics is math and physics everywhere, right? I'm good at it. What do I want to do with it? So I ended up going to engineering school. I went to a community college and working, almost, part-time, full-time at a restaurant. I bartended and waited tables, which kind of helped a lot with, improving my English over time while I was going to school. And then I went to a community college for about 2 years, and I studied the basic courses, the math and physics and differential equations and all that fun stuff. And then I transferred to University of Illinois Chicago, studied mechanical engineering. And then from there on, I had a variety of different kind of internships in variety of kind of industries. I worked for John Deere, I worked for Bosch, and a few other smaller companies around Chicago, mostly in product development and design and engineering. Kind of quickly realized that although as much fun it is to kind of come up with a new product and a new hardware, I kind of wanted to do a little bit more. I wanted to understand the business side. I wanted to get into see more things. And then I ended up taking a sales engineering job right out of college after my internships were over, and I worked for a holding company that had about 30 manufacturing facilities that were mostly in machine parts, springs, and fasteners. So I ended up traveling quite a bit throughout those facilities, got really familiarized with that industry. And my job was to understand every offering that these manufacturers had, capabilities, the equipment they carried. So when I'm meeting customers, I could look at their prints and what are they trying to build and say, well, yeah, we have a factory that could build X. And, kind of my job was to kind of coordinate and figure out what is the best manufacturing facility to build the part that the customers want. I was there for about a year, and then I worked for the company was called MW Industries. You can look them up, and they've grown to be I think 50, 60 manufacturing facilities today. After that, I kind of wanted to get into a little bit more high tech, if you will, components and hardwares and a little more complex things. And automation was growing really quickly, and then I kind of landed in a German motor and a gearbox manufacturer called Dunker Motoren, and they're owned by a company called Amatec. From there, I got kind of my first taste of what is the world of automation and robotics is going, because majority of the customers that we were working with and dealing with were large, OEMs like Dematic, Intelligrated, that they were building, little AGVs or ASRS systems. So I got a little taste of how automation and manufacturing world works specifically. And from there on, I used to go to a lot of trade shows, and I always kind of watching what's new, what's cool, what's interesting. And I came across a company called Universal Robots, which was a robot manufacturer, the leading collaborative robot manufacturers in the world. And I ended up taking a job with them after kind of talking to a few people there. And I was responsible for managing the channel and distribution network in Midwest area. So I was managing Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri, working with distributors, system integrators. And that gave me the privilege to really walk thousands of manufacturing facilities, understand their struggles, what keeps the owners up at night, and how new technology, which is robotics and automation, can help them kind of get to the next level. And I was there for about 3 years. And during my life I kind of realized quickly that anything new that manufacturers want to adopt, it's kind of from their end, it's a risky proposition to change their process. Not only that, also there's a lot of risk with actually investing in new technologies. Although they needed automation and they needed the hardware, they needed somebody to come and actually get them educated, not only educated, but help them deploy automation and robotics. A lot of them, were kind of afraid of making the investment. At the same time, I kind of noticed their production rates are going down. Their productivity is fairly low because of the labor shortage that we've been facing in this country for the past 3, 4, 5 years. As I was talking to more and more of these manufacturers, I kind of got this pattern. I saw this pattern that oftentimes manufacturers want to invest in anything new. They buy a piece of equipment, they pay for everything up front, and there is no guarantee that the system will work. And I saw some manufacturers that bought something, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's just a very expensive, shiny paperweight that sits on their floor. So I kind of tried to understand, what is a better way to do this? How do we get manufacturers who want to invest in automation, who want to, take their business to the next level and be more productive, without having them to bear 100% of the risk of owning a piece of equipment on their floor, especially when it's kind of a brand new technology like robotics. So I kind of mulled over their idea for a little while, trying to figure out better ways to help them. And I kind of quickly realized that if I want to do something, I have to go ahead and get it started, because there's no such thing exists as an organization that will bear 100% of the risk, and manufacturers only take advantage of the benefits of it. So I started Formic. What Formic does is we carry 100% of the risk. We buy the equipment. We work with engineering firms and subcontractors and system integrators on coming up with a turnkey solution for whatever the customer needs. We deploy it at their facility. We take care of all the service and maintenance for ongoing of that system. And we don't ask them to pay us anything up front. We just deploy the system, and we say, if the system works and does exactly what we agreed on, you pay us a flat hourly rate. So it's kind of a subscription service for automation and robotics. And everybody needs software. Today they just go subscribe to something. They don't set up their own servers and write their own codes. We try to bring that to hardware as well.
Well, Misa, you jump right past that human stuff I want to talk about for a little while and right into the automation side of things. But it's okay, because to be fair, that's what I get excited about as well. I mean, as much as I love you and the amazing person that you are, the company that you created, holy cow, it blows my mind, and it's incredible. However, if it's okay with you, I would like to take a small step back, and I know we've done a timeline of about 30 years at this point. I'm not even sure if you're 30 yet. You're a young man, but let's go back to, you mentioned, and I've heard other people say this as well. I've worked with people who are in accounting. And they're from all over the world. I go, well, why'd you pick accounting? They're like, well, I don't really love it. I'm kind of bored with it, but numbers translate in every language. So I can go from one country to another country and just kind of, so you kind of mentioned that. What was it like coming from Iran over to the US? I'd like to know a little bit more about that, because I've had conversations. I had one just the other day, a little bit older gentleman. He came from China, but he was 4 years old, and so the story is a little bit different. I've had some, coming over from Nigeria, stories like that coming over, but it's always, everyone's story is a little bit unique, and some are simple and some are difficult, and some are a roller coaster, and everything in between. And because I do want to humanize everyone in this industry to figure out who we are, I'd like to learn a little bit more about what that journey was like, and maybe not just for you, but your siblings and your parents as well. Yeah.
I actually moved here on my own, right? So my entire family, I come from a huge family. I have 5 siblings, and I'm the youngest in the family, and I'm the only one who moved. And I think, it's the experience was, I mean, at that time, I'm sure anybody who listens, they kind of, their teens, their late teens is kind of hazy, right? So, you make decisions very rapidly, because you don't know any better, right? You just, it's like, hey, I'm just going to roll with the punches and do X, Y, Z. And kind of the whole idea behind it was, I kind of wanted to always do something on my own, because when I was growing up, my brothers are extremely successful, and everybody kind of looked up to them, and I kind of wanted to make my own mark, and that kind of initiated the idea of going somewhere and starting brand new, right? That idea was just what kept me from, what kept me going, and the whole experience was. At that time, although it looked very scary, I don't think I really thought the whole process through, right? It's like, I'm going to a country, I don't really speak the language, I don't quite know the culture as well. I mean, yes, growing up, I watched NBA and all Hollywood movies and all that kind of stuff. I had family who lived here, who visited us once in a while, but I didn't know exactly what I'm getting into, right? But I was fortunate enough to come here, and just kind of live with my extended family here for a little while, and ended up adopting a lot of friends that had similar mindsets, right? That kind of when I first moved here, I didn't know exactly what I'm going to do, so I had a little bike, and then I wasn't even driving. I was just trying to find a job so I can move out of my uncle's house just right away, because that was I wanted to be independent from the get-go. I had a little bike, just basically I lived in northwest suburbs of Chicago. I biked to find a job from all the way. For people who are familiar, I went to Woodfield Malls, filled out an application, every company that every little store that they had. Finally ended up finding a job at Benihana, out of all places. So I worked in a restaurant as a host. And, to humanize the process, I could tell you a funny story about how I ended up taking that job. So, I would go in and fill out an application in every shop that I could go in there. And one thing, and as I mentioned earlier, my English wasn't that great. The only thing that I knew how to say really, really well was, "Are you guys hiring right now?" Like, I'm perfect at that. Yeah. And then like, yeah, fill out an application and here you go. I remember I made it to a second round of interview at Express, the clothing company, initially, and then they're like, "Hey, we like your work ethic, but your English is not that great. Like, we can't give you a job because you have to interact with customers, understand what they're saying." I was like, all right, I was kind of defeated. I was like, all right, it is what it is. So on the way back, from that interview, as I was biking, I was like, hey, I filled out an application at Benihana. Let me just go check it out and see if they need somebody. I walk in there, it's hustling and bustling. It's like, I think it's a Friday night or something, and they're really busy. And I walk in there and they're like, the manager's like, hey, what do you want? And it's like, hey, I filled out an application, just trying to make sure that, if any position's open, I'm taking it. I'm thinking like a dishwasher or something, whatever, right? Or a busboy. And they go like, we need a host. Can you be a host? And I have no idea what a host actually is and does, right? So I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. So on the way back, I called my uncle and like, hey, I just got off Benihana. I think I might have a job. They said, can you be a host? And, I said, yeah. And like, well, what does a host do? Actually, I have no idea. Like, oh, you answer the phones and, you sit the customers down. Like, Jesus, I don't know how to answer phones. I don't know what the person says on the other end. But, I ended up taking the job, and it was like a tough first couple of months, sometimes like somebody would call or just pass on the phone to the co-host or somebody else that was next to me. But like, over time, I learned, and I kind of, I worked there, and I ended up waiting there and bartending there while going to college. But I think part of it is that kept things going. I was always so motivated because I was excited that I could find a job. I was excited that I could go to school right away. I was excited that I didn't have any money. So like I ended up getting a lot of loans and grants and scholarships, and I got financial aid. So the whole thing it came so easy to a certain extent, because all the resources were available for the taking. So it was a pretty exciting time for me, to just know that, I just moved here and I'm here, I'm going to school, I'm working. It was kind of within the span of like 2 months, which was amazing. But yeah, that's kind of the story of, the experience of moving here.
Dude, I'm inspired, honestly. So like, in summary, you left your parents, came to a new country, barely spoke the language, went and got jobs, got a degree in engineering, and went to work.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. What did your family think about your decision when you were leaving?
My family is fairly supportive. They, I was the youngest in the family, so it was always a little spoiled. So people are like, yeah, you good luck. You're gonna go in there, and then you're gonna be miserable, and then probably you'll come back. And that was the whole idea. I think my family had, like, yeah, you'll go there for a little while, and you think it's not made for you, and you're gonna come back. So I don't know if it was me trying to prove everybody wrong or what. I made it happen. But my family is always supportive. I mean, I talk to them on a regular basis. I'm very close to my family. Try to talk to them, every now and then. And as you can imagine, with my extended, nieces and nephews, this is like 30 people in the family. So I usually have about 2 to 3 hours every weekend, just like going through the phone and FaceTiming everybody and talking to them. But they're excited. I inspire a lot of my nieces and nephews what to do next in life, which is amazing. So that's they're proud. Although my mom still thinks I should become a doctor, because that's kind of a thing in the Middle East. You're either a doctor, you're an engineer, you're a lawyer, or you're a disappointment. And so it's my mom still thinks like, hey, you should go to medical school, you should become a doctor. Like
it's not too late. It's not too late.
Yeah.
You can hop right on in. It doesn't take
like,
10 years of school.
I like my mom. I really enjoy it. Like, I really enjoy what I do, and I think it's more. It's really exciting. So,
yeah. Oh gosh, I can. Yeah, I've heard that story once or twice before. Being in India for as long as I was over the last couple of years, and having so many friends from the Middle East, and even to be fair, a lot of the Asian countries as well. I've worked with some good friends from Korea who sent their child here to the U.S. and I helped them go to their private school as young as middle school, and they're no longer with their family. They are straight schooling for the rest of their lives until they become a doctor or a lawyer. And that's the goal, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
Goodness. Well, let's talk about Formic now. Now that we know a bit more about you and Benihana and singing all the birthday songs, because that's why everybody goes to Benihana, right? It's so they can have their birthday song, the song sang to them. And have some hibachi. So now that we know a little bit more about that, let's talk about Formic. And if it's okay, I'd like to introduce it. And the reason I'd like to introduce it is because you're going to correct me on all the things I'm wrong about. However, I'm going to say it because I am incredibly excited about it. And I honestly believe so much in the decision that you made somewhat recently. I want to say October of 2020. And then if I remember you telling me correctly, around February, March was the first real acquisition of partnering with someone. And then the first implementation of that partnership only just recently happened within the last month or so, right? So exactly. This idea and concept, I am honored to present with MTD to be one of the first, if not the first, to share this story, other than you being a great advocate for the company and the other folks that you work with, but on a broad scale, domestically, regionally, globally, to say, go Google Formic, go to the website, which I'm going to let you give a little bit later, and figure out how they can help you. Because in my opinion, this is the next part of our evolution in manufacturing. And to all the listeners out there, now that I'm done rambling, I will tell you why I believe this. Whether it be a skills gap, whether it be the need from the lack of people, or we have enough people, but we just need to get more parts, to get more parts out the door, to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's lots of different ways to do it. There's pallet change options. There's bar feeder options. There's robotic options. There's massive robotic cells. There's cobots and robots. There's lots of different ideas out there about how we can get it done. And I've seen some really magnificent robotic cells that do everything from, loading a part, measuring to make sure it's good, putting it in the machine, machining the part, pulling the part out, measuring to make sure it's good when it's finished, putting it back in if it's not. I mean, the interconnected solutions of all these brilliant companies out there are allowing us to run mostly human free as far as the actual pushing the button to make it go and doing some of the mundane stuff. And for those of you out here, immediately your mind goes to robots are taking jobs. I can't tell you to immediately remove it because that's unfair. It's been ingrained in us. It's part of a fear tactic that we have in self-defense. It's how it works. And I get that, but robots are not taking jobs. They are adding jobs. They're allowing us to get back to why we love machining and manufacturing and engineering to begin with, instead of the mundane stuff. And if you are just a button pusher and that robot's going to take your button pusher job, well, guess what? We get to learn something new. And if you refuse to learn something new on a robot, then if you're just pushing a button, then you can also just package a box, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's okay. And it's repetitive, and so be it, but you won't lose your job, right? What I'm trying to say is, automation of some sort is the way of future manufacturing. And I really believe, and I've read books about, some sci-fi and some more nonfiction and some fiction, but about the ability where we can reduce our numbers of hours we're putting into our lives for work and have an incredible life outside of work, but we're still making the same amount of money. There's interactions of information which bring money and not just the actual hands-on labor that we've done for thousands of years. Anyway, now I've gone on a tangent, a long tangent, but I get so excited about this because I do believe in Formic. So from the outside looking in, what is Formic to you? To me, it is a company that will go to a medium or small size company. Well, they'll go into all of you, but I really see this value in medium and small size companies who not afford to have $100,000, $300,000, $1 million up front to launch a cell for them, to launch a robotics cell, because it's going to take time to make that money back. And that upfront capital just doesn't exist in some of these companies. What Formic is going to do is they will take on all of that responsibility to more or less buy that robot, make sure that cell is running by partnering with integrators and by partnering with OEMs in turnkey situations. They will allow you to follow along. They will follow along, but they're taking on all the responsibility. When it hits your shop floor, as long as it's working, this is when Formic starts to get paid. And if it's not working, you still don't have to stress about it. It is almost literally like an insurance company for setting up automation in your shop with you having to put zero down. It sounds like I work for the company. I don't. I just believe in the capability of what it can do for everyone. So now that I've given this spiel, even though this podcast is all about Misa, so I apologize, my friend. Please pick up where I've left off, correct where I went wrong, and explain it in your perspective as well.
Absolutely. You're spot on, Tony. I think I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about, just the overall mission of automation and robotics that every company is kind of preaching. But I want to kind of talk about it a little bit. I think, looking back at our history in the United States, I think 100 years ago, 50% of the population were working in farms. To just be able to provide food and put food on the table and feed the rest of the country. And if you go further, 80, 90, 99% of the people were just doing farming. With automated, agriculture, right? It kind of freed up this human potential to come and do more creative things, create art, create, new theories, new technologies, because it freed up people from just working to be able to put food on the table, right? The 40-hour weeks came, so people do more creative things instead of working, 15 hours on a field. And I think that's the next level of human potential is going to be released when we automate more. So when we take all the mundane jobs that people are doing every day, day in and day out. Nobody wants to push a button all day, every day. People want to do more creative things. And I think automation is going to make that available. And we hope that to play a small part in kind of releasing that human potential in this industrial revolution that we're experiencing. So I think what Formic does specifically beyond what you just described, it kind of demystifies the automation. What is oftentimes, the way that I try to explain the world of automation to people who are not in it is, it's like I kind of compare it to the medical industry. Like you go to a hospital to get a procedure done, you don't really know how much it's going to cost. There's no clear, instructions like, okay, what is the advantages and disadvantages of doing this process versus that process, right? So you go get a bunch of things done because you're desperate, you're sick, and then you get a bill at the end of the day. You don't know what you were charged for, but you pay for it anyway, right? Or sometimes I guess you don't. That's kind of the way that the automation world is today, especially for small, medium-sized companies that don't have much automation, especially they might have a CNC mill, lathe, which is some level of automation, but they don't have that, robotic automation to load and unload their machines, to do the deburring, to do the polishing, to do the welding. A lot of these tasks are still fairly manual. But, in order to kind of get them to that next level, oftentimes people experiment. Like, oh, let me get a piece of automation. Let me get a robot. And I kind of saw that mostly when I was at Universal Robots, because a lot of those customers that we dealt with were small, medium-sized companies that were venturing into automation, kind of because Universal Robot looked very non-threatening. The software is very easy to use. You just move the robots from point to point. You understand, it's very, the concept of the way that you program the robots was very, very easy. So it gravitated a lot of people who said, maybe automation is not for me, but now it's that simple. Maybe I'll come and maybe I'll do it. But beyond the programming of the robot, oftentimes the challenges are, the tooling and the fixturing and everything else that it goes beyond designing the right end of arm tooling, the programming the robot correctly, doing the quality inspection, maybe the vision system, which takes a lot of engineering resources and know-how to do that. So, as I was working at UR, there's a lot of customers who kind of picked a robot and just ran with it. Their application was simple enough, but the bulk majority of them, they needed extra assistance to get the system up and running. That's when the system integrators came in, right? The people who all do this day in and day out. They put systems together, they deploy automation and robotics for other people. But by the time that the system integrators get involved, oftentimes the cost of the system goes up. The robot might be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, but the amount of efforts and engineering that the system integrator needs to put in kind of drives up the cost because they need to get paid and they need to, work as well. So oftentimes I kind of budgeted out a $40,000 robot to be $150,000 now CapEx investment, which nobody wanted to make because, it's a big risk. And oftentimes the projects would go a year, 2 years to justify the money, and kind of in the meantime, people are losing production. They can't hit their timeline. They're losing orders. They're saying no to business. Where I kind of kept seeing this over and over again, and then at the same time, I kind of saw these manufacturers. The main reason that they can't go to the next level, produce more parts, keep up with their production needs, go after new business was, they just didn't have enough people to come in and do some of those mundane tasks. And they will happily pay them, whatever and oftentimes extremely attractive bonuses to just show up to work and, paying them more and the wages keep increasing, which kind of tightens their margin over time, which makes them not be able to compete as well. So, with Formic, what we decided to do, we said, look, we'll charge you by the hour. And oftentimes this hourly rate is significantly less than what you would normally pay a full-time operator to do that task, right? And guess what? You could run a second shift and a third shift. And the more you run the system, the cheaper the hourly rate gets. We take care of all the ongoing service and maintenance. If the robot breaks down, if anything wears and tears, we cover the cost of that. The customers don't pay anything beyond the hourly rate that we agreed on. They might, their needs might change 6 months down the road, a year down the road. We're there to help them to kind of retool and repurpose and reprogram that robot without a huge investment on their end. So, what we're trying to do is kind of have a skin in the game, right? We say, we'll get the system to you and we'll make it work. And hopefully your production, needs increase over time. And then you'll get a second robot and a third robot and a fourth robot. That's kind of the idea we're trying to do here, and without them having to take any risk, right? That's kind of the idea.
Yeah, I was fascinated by the idea as you knew from the first time we met, and I believe in the idea. You and I recently caught up at a place that's 105 years old. 105-year-old company, and they have machines in there that are probably almost as old as the company itself from what I was looking at. I mean, and being a bit more serious, probably a good 50 years old or so. I mean, these are old, stamping machines, and you automated it, and that post is done really well on socials because we see automation from time to time, but it's kind of neat to see something unique. And you started this off, I think, with a really fantastic description by talking about agriculture. And I don't know if that's part of the sales pitch that you guys got together to help people understand how it works, or if that comes from your own personal background of growing up in farming and seeing how it works, or whatever. But to me, that's a great story because, I mean, when you think about how people needed to survive centuries ago, it was, well, what do I need first? Well, food. What do I need second? Shelter. Okay, well, that's taking all of my time. How do I get more of both? Right. Yeah. And then once we did that, we got to do more. This is when, maybe not throughout time, but for the most part, we've seen a lot more freedom in the arts, whether it be liberal arts or creative arts, in music. There's more people that get the opportunity to dive into those types of things and hobbies. And what about even just maybe stepping away from work for a few more minutes? I mean, here in the US, we work so much all my buddies over in Europe right now are having almost the whole month of August off. What if we could take more time off to enjoy our lives? So to me, there's so many benefits. Are you able, I guess maybe we shouldn't. I was gonna say, are you able to talk about specific numbers of that hourly rate? Because I know the one that we were just at, but I don't want to say something out loud if you're not allowed to, especially if it varies. But when you say significantly less, I know for a fact if I'm listening to this podcast right now, I'm going, well, what's that number? Oh, you don't want to tell me? Oh, I see how this is. Oh, you don't want to tell me. I see. So is that something we can discuss, or is that something where we should just, give out your personal cell number and have them call you if they want to know your number?
No,
I mean, know that number.
We'd love to be transparent. And the whole reason that we're doing what we're doing is to bring transparency to the industry. But the way that we calculate our hourly rates is there's three main factors that goes into it. And I will tell you what those numbers are based on a simple example of an application that we're talking about. The number one factor is if you were to design and build a system that does load a lathe or a mill or a punch press or a press brake, and address, let's say, 10 different part variation, how many hours our customers can actually utilize that system, assuming it works all the time? Is that 1,500 hours? Is that 2,000 hours per year? Is it 5,000? Is it 24/7? What is that? That's kind of number one thing that will determine what the hourly rate is. Obviously, the longer you use the robot, the lower the hourly rate becomes. So it's not overtime. We agree on a minimum usage on an annual basis. If you use it more, you pay less on an hourly basis. The second thing that goes into it is the length of the contract that the customer is comfortable signing, right? So they could say, I have this job for the next year, and then, or I have, I'll need automation for the foreseeable future for the next 5 years. As long as this works, we'll pay you by the hour. Our needs might change. The parts that we might be loading to the lathe and mill and punch press might change, but we think, are we going to be in business? And we need you to come in, retool and repurpose the robot to do the new part that we're running. And the third factor is how much engineering and hardware cost associated with this system, right? So how much does the robot cost? How much the system integrator is going to charge us for their deployment? What do you anticipate the cost of the servicing this equipment is going to be? What are the wear and tear components? So those are the three main factors that will decide what the hourly rate would be. But I would say if it's a one-on-one comparison between what on a one shift operation, oftentimes our hourly rates are about $15 to $25 an hour. If you're running a second shift operation, that rate might be $10 to $15 an hour. If you're running a three shift operation, it could be as little as $4 or $5 an hour. That being said, we have large projects that we're doing deburring on large engine manifolds that it's a $2.3 million automation cell, right? The hourly rate for that is obviously slightly higher, but the productivity and throughput for the manufacturer is comparable to what we're charging them, right? We never want to charge you something that doesn't have an OPEX ROI for you. Oftentimes manufacturers know what their profit margins, what is the cost that they're willing to pay per part that they're manufacturing. We could offer manufacturers to just pay us per part, pay per pick or per weld or per pack that we for boxes that we palletize, right? We're flexible. We try to say, look, we will try to come up with the hourly rate that will save you money from an operational standpoint, and also give you unlimited bandwidth and capacity to produce parts in the second shift and the third shift.
I often sit here just kind of in silence, contemplating what this could be, and I think the choices that you've made in your life have led you to a very positive path. So I value your wisdom. There's also a reason why I keep meeting with you and filming with you and doing podcasts with you, is because I believe this could help so many people. And as much as I like you, it's not just about you. It's about all of these other people out there that could be helped. And so I don't mind standing on a mountaintop and helping in any way that I can with this. However, I do expect a certain percentage based on MTD being the most popular news channel for manufacturing in the world, and all the people that are listening to this. And I'm just teasing now, Misa. I'm just teasing. I'm incredibly impressed with what you guys are doing. I am honored to share it. when we get to this point of the show, everyone who's made it this far, which pretty much everyone stays. I mean, our shows are pretty awesome. I like to ask for a piece of advice from my guest, and you can give that advice from anything, because I think based on your story of growing up in another country, making the brave change as the youngest in your family to kind of try something new in a country where your English wasn't the best, and family kind of saying, "Oh, you'll be back. We'll see you in a little while," but then going to college and then having the pursuit through engineering to learn something and then move and learn something and then create something that can kind of possibly, hopefully change the way we're doing things in a very, very positive way. Whatever piece of advice to whomever, see, my English isn't so good either. To whomever you'd like to reach out to, I'd love to hear a piece of your wisdom.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, my personal mission and personal goal is to get more people into manufacturing. Manufacturing is really cool. It's tangible. It's kind of an art. So, my piece of advice for whoever is, contemplating on what career to pick is to really look at this evolving technologies like robotics, automation. There's a lot of cool things happening in inspection, and, just get involved, because there's more talent always needed to come in and learn these new technologies, which are very, good paying jobs. If you invest the time and the energy to go to Fanuc or Universal Robots and learn their, understand how they would work, and maybe take a course in a community college in a machine design, right? You could have a very successful, prosperous career. We work with a lot of, small integrators and entrepreneurs that, that's exactly what they do. I mean, they build and design machines. They work for, they work really hard for 6, 7, 8 months out of the year. They make a killing, and they just take 3, 4 months off and go travel the world, right? I mean, we see a lot of these kind of people that kind of are able to do this. It's, the industry might look scary from the outside, but when you get into it, you get your hands dirty. You walk the manufacturing facilities. You go take a class or two in a community college, or, there's a lot of cool people that are teaching this stuff for free. I mean, Titans of CNC, and we're all familiar with that. He's doing a service. I mean, he's teaching a lot of courses for free. And there's a lot of like online trainings for robotics and automation. So I suggest people who are looking to maybe move careers, or just going to get into automation more, is kind of seek these resources. And I'm happy to be the resource to kind of point them in the right direction, because I'm involved. I see who's doing what, and who's looking for talent, who's looking for, mentees to come in and learn the process. That's kind of the piece of advice I would give to maybe people who are looking to, change careers and get into manufacturing, or if they're in manufacturing, they're trying to step it up, and get paid more and make more money. The other piece of advice is to manufacturers who are listening. I think, it's always, we're all around the world. Everybody's automating at an extremely rapid rate. I mean, in China bought more robots than US and Europe combined, past 4 years in a row, right? If you want to stay competitive, if you want to keep manufacturing here, we need to take risks. We need to take chances with new things and new technologies. So there's something that, we could help them with, or they just want to go and buy the equipment and learn it. It's the time to do it. It's not a luxury anymore, automation. It's a necessity, and we need to act, and we need to act quickly to stay competitive with the rest of the world.
I love that you chose that direction for the wisdom. And the most important part of what you just said that stands out to me, and it's factual, it's true, it's not made up, it's not meant to be a sales pitch, is China bought more robotics over the last few years than Europe and the US combined. Think about that. When you think about the top manufacturing countries in the world, we know, and it varies a little, but we know China's number 1, US number 2, Japan number 3, Germany number 4, and then, it kind of goes on from there. But you think about that. Well, if the number 1 manufacturing country in the world right now is China, at, I believe, a little over 4 trillion a year, it makes you, it's things that make you go, you know what I mean? And normally I would close this out right now, Misa, but before we go, I would like for you to share your website, or how people can get in touch with you, because I think that's important as well.
Absolutely. So everybody could find us at formic.co. That's FORMIC.co. We are active on LinkedIn. Formic Technologies is our LinkedIn page. You could find me, although my name is kind of tough to kind of remember. My name is Misa Ilkhechi. If you look up Formic Technologies, I'll come up, and I'll post a lot of content about automation and robotics. And you can find us in Tony's LinkedIn page. He has done a few shout outs for us, shot a video for us, and if you're following Tony closely on his LinkedIn page or Instagram, you'll be able to find us there as well.
Well, I like that you said that your name is somewhat difficult, because how I remember it in my brain is you say Ilkhechi, but in my head I go, Misa, it's catchy. Like it's just, it's memorable. It's catchy,
Yeah.
Very close similarity. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Gunn Show. I hope we had the opportunity to humanize Misa a little bit right before we unhumanized and went straight into robotics. But I hope you learned a lot about the possibilities and creativity, and somewhat of an insurance now for those of you who don't have that capital, that know you need to get into automation to compete. I think it is not an understatement for me to repeat what happened in a conversation when I was with you recently, Misa, at that company in Chicago, where they said we might have gone out of business in the next few years without these robotics to help us compete with China. Remember that, think of that. I think it's important. But for now, it is time to say goodbye. Thank you all for listening to The Gunn Show. Misa, you have been amazing. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate you. It's a pleasure.